just stop it. The run-of-the-mill, cheesy, humdrum bullshit status quo just tires me out. What fascinates me are the industry disruptors, the superhuman frontiersmen or women who go through hell to achieve their goals. Join me as we meet and learn from those mavericks, rebels, and business leaders that aren't afraid to piss off the establishment in order to make radical change for good. Sponsored by Johto PR, the disruptive anti-PR firm that murders your competition with cinder blocks and cyanide. This is Disruption Interruption. Welcome back, everybody, to Disruption Interruption. I'm your host, KJ, and we're here today to talk to someone who has taken the reins of their industry horse and steered it off the lame, tired path of the status quo. Today's guest is a Chief Growth Officer. Why is that important? Well, companies today can no longer rely off of easy growth in today's digital fast environment. He's an experienced badass in the field of global IT implementations. Why is that? He has a background as an Accenture consultant. He was the co-founder, and he still is an advisor of an innovative pen test as a service company. And he today is the co-founder of the fastest and most friendly onboarding flow builder for SaaS online businesses on the market. Coming to us live from the San Francisco Bay Area, please welcome our disruptor, co-founder and CGO at Userflow, Esben Friis-Jensen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. How are you, Esben?
I'm good. Just had my morning coffee and everything is great.
Okay, good. Me too. So you're disrupting this whole, onboarding of SaaS flow builder for SaaS companies. So before we get into that, I want you to really tell me, what is your main ingredient for disruption?
I think it's as many founders in the tech space, it's really about looking at something and seeing this can be done smarter, and especially with software instead of the manual or legacy process. So that's how I look at most things. It's like if it's not involving software, then it could probably be done better. And that's what I've done with both of my businesses, both in Cobalt, where we changed a more traditional kind of security testing industry into a more modern software-driven method. And then with Userflow now, we're helping people onboard better on software products so we can bring more software solutions to the world. So I'm really driven by getting more software out there in the world. There's a famous kind of quote from a VC investor called Mark Andreessen, where he says software is eating the world, and I think it still is. Even though the stock market right now might not reflect that, or they have some doubts, then I think it will bounce back. And there's so much, so many legacy processes in the world that needs to be driven by software instead of paper.
I agree with you on that. So this is a new one, but software is leading the world, right? And so that is really your main disruption, figuring out a way for software to make people's lives easier, work easier. So you're helping people really actually be compliant with, as compliant customers, right? Actually user customers for SaaS companies.
Yeah, you can say what Userflow does is it allows software businesses to add a layer on top of their own software without having developers involved. So they can build it like customer success managers or product managers. They can build these layers on top, which is basically guides to the user on how to use the software. So that can be checklists, it can be step-by-step guides, it can be links, etc. So we're really helping these software customers better onboard customers, and particularly maybe non-tech savvy customers, right? Somebody who needs a bit more guidance when using the software. So I think that's something I find great because one, it of course it in general helps these software companies become more effective, but it also helps a lot of people to use software basically.
Which is making them more effective because they want people to use their software, right? So
exactly.
It's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It has a triple effect. So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, so what is this? Let's talk about this, because the SaaS market is rapidly blowing up, right? I just was reading statistics of how many tens of thousands of SaaS companies have, come onto the market, are on the market. But what's the status quo of these SaaS companies in the terms of users and, them being user friendly? I mean, we have a variety of apps that we use, and not all of them are user friendly, right? And some of them are really robust, and it sort of pisses us off, right? Because we can't really use them. But build the status quo for me.
Yeah, no, so I don't have any like statistics on the UX. It's hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
But there's definitely there's a new trend in the software as a service market called product-led growth. And what that speaks to is a new kind of way of thinking about your software, where you focus more on having the product drive more of the growth, basically. And actually a big part of that is that you need a great UX in your product, because otherwise people wouldn't know how to use the product without support, right? And I think software as a service companies in the past have been getting away with just having customer success or customer support be a stopgap solution, right? Where they can cover all the gaps in the software. And especially in enterprise software where you have a lot of functionality, you often end up solving the support part by adding people, right? But what this product-led growth movement does is really start thinking about that in another way, where you think, okay, what if we didn't add people? What should we do with the product to actually make it easier to use, right? And maybe that will result in cutting features sometimes. That's actually not unrealistic, that you sometimes cut away some of the fat from these applications. But it's also about improving the general UX and improving things like onboarding, for instance, using tools like our own Userflow.
Isn't it sort of like an oxymoron when you have a software that's supposed to make things easier and the workflow, less burdensome, that you have to add more people to it to actually operate it?
Well, I think so, probably, even though it's bloated software, then it's still better than the traditional process, which was maybe paper and pen or whatever, spreadsheets. So I think it's always a good step. And typically what just ends up happening with these software products is, as they grow, they start adding more and more features, right? If you look at something like Salesforce, which is a widely used software application,
just thinking of that,
salespeople, I mean, they grow and grow, and then they keep adding features, right? But if you really look at it, probably the majority of Salesforce users are just using the core functionality of Salesforce. So I think they could win a lot, and I think they are actually. I think they offer like an essentials product, which is more focused towards the maybe SMBs and so on, where they actually cut away a lot of this extra stuff, right? Because it's just kind of confusing, right? You don't need to look at all that stuff. So I think in general, software makes things better. What then ends up happening is you sometimes end up adding too many things and making it complex. And that is, of course, not good. So then you have to rethink again, and how can I make it smarter, better UX and so on. But in general, I think software always makes things better, but then the next step is making the software better.
Yes.
Or keeping the software good.
Well, of course you would say that, because that's your main ingredient, right? Yeah. Software makes things better. Software is leading the world, right? Yeah. So now we have software to make software better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You can kind of say that. And I think it's an evolution, right? That makes sense. First, you have to get people to use software. And then as you have gotten that has happened, then you start improving your software and making it better, right? And smarter.
What has been the biggest pain point, the pent up demand that makes this innovation so demanded right now, of making software now to make software better?
I think one of the big changes has been this whole, some people call it the end user era. Basically, the new generation coming out on the workplace are used to technology. They're used to using mobile apps, software for all sorts of things, right? and they expect the same in their workplace, and they expect to actually self-serve. They don't expect that they need to speak with a customer success or customer support or whatever. They want to have those available, but they don't see it as a necessity to get started, right? And the problem for software as a service was they had kind of ended up in a situation where they had made or have made, and some businesses are still in that state, where they've made customer success a necessity, right? They need to be there for you to start using this software product. But in the end user era, that's not good, because people get annoyed by that, adding that people extra layer, unnecessary layer, right? And you should instead focus on how can we allow them to self-serve, and then of course be there when they need support, but don't make it a necessary step.
Got it. So we're in this end user era,
yeah.
Right? When did that sort of start coming to fruition?
I think probably in the 2000s already. So these things, or maybe 2010s, I would say probably, and it just moves slow, right? I would say actually I've always been a big advocate for self-service myself. So my generation as well, like it, depending on how tech savvy you were. But I think the big difference is now the generation right after mine, maybe a lot more tech savvy, all of them, right? So they're like just expecting these things, and it will only, for each generation, it's only become more and more.
It's only going to accelerate, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's been kind of there, but it hasn't been enough people to justify it. But now I think we're in a state where there's enough people to justify it, that you have to make self-service a big focus for your software.
Well, you obviously saw that before you founded Userflow, right?
Yeah.
You obviously saw this as an opportunity. What are some of the things that you saw as how the market was changing, other than what you've already said?
So I was in Cobalt before, just to give some background on that. I started 8 years ago. I started another company called Cobalt with 3 Danish co-founders. And what we did was, it was a software as a service platform for security testing, so penetration testing as it's called. And in the beginning, we actually went through this exact evolution, right? And we were replacing the consultancies. So they were very much like selling this on, spreadsheet. You get your result in a spreadsheet. We do the test, but we don't really give you any transparency how we do the test. You just get a report in then, which is a Word document and a spreadsheet, right? And what we did is we turned this process into software. So suddenly people could follow the test in real time. They could see the results as they come in. They could communicate with the testers via the software and all this stuff, right? Over time, though, we added customer success as a big part of this software. And that meant you can say, some of the self-service components, there were some things you just couldn't do self-service in our product, right? And we realized that, I think, 3 years ago or so. And then we started saying, okay, that's not good enough, right? Like if we want to play in this end user era, we need to have the entire software be self-service, right? And make it real, you can say, true software, as I was called. And basically, that's the journey we embarked on. So we basically moved towards this product-led growth and started looking at all the processes in the software platform and trying to make them self-service and product-led. And that whole process, I loved it.
What did you love about it?
Yeah, I know. I just think it's kind of like taking a process that has a lot of stop gaps and is ineffective. And then you have to look at, okay, each and single step, how could we turn this into a self-service experience? And actually one thing that's interesting about that is that you have to cut away things because it's a lot of the things you do as a person, it doesn't work in a self-service world, right? Like you can add a lot more support as a person. You can give customized answers and all this stuff, right? But you don't need a user doesn't necessarily need that, right? It's not a need to have, it's a nice to have. So you really had to think really tough on each of these processes and say, okay, is this a need to have step, or could we just cut it away, right? Like, could we just make it a nice to have step that people can buy as an extra package if they want the person to support them on this, right? But in general, all the need to have steps should be self-service. And that was I love that kind of like optimization and thinking of creatively about processes and so on. So that's the process we went through, and that's what inspired me to join Userflow together with my co-founders.
Well, that makes total sense, because it has a lot to do with the inspection and evaluation of business processes just in general. Like, you look at nice to haves and the things that are vital, right?
Yeah.
And you focus on the vital, and that sounds like what you're doing.
Exactly.
Tell me more about this innovation. Tell me more about this software that supports the software.
Yeah, no, so it's really, it is a big, it's part of, besides from being part of this whole product-led growth trend, it's also a big part of another trend called no code, low code. And that's something you're going to hear more and more in the future. And really what that is about, it's about allowing non-developers to build software. Basically, imagine that you can allow anybody to build. That's actually been the case for many years. You can allow anybody to build a website, right, using things like WordPress and things like that.
Yeah.
But now it starts to become more sophisticated software you can build without code, and that's a very interesting journey, because suddenly the developers become more the tool builders, right? And that's what we become in Userflow. We become the tool builder. So we build a tool that allows others to build, right? So we're building a tool that allows non-developers to basically build these onboarding journeys, and quite sophisticated onboarding journeys with contextualization, personalization, all this stuff, without having to involve developers. And that's it just changes the world, right? Because and this can continue to other areas, right? And suddenly you end up in a world where it's like the salesperson is building the sales software, right? And the customer success person is building the customer success processes software in the company, right? So that's
that's kick-ass. You know, it is changing the world. You are interrupting a whole value network. I mean, you're interrupting the developers.
Yes.
I mean, really,
you can argue that.
We
are taking some work away from developers, but then they can focus, you can say, in the software companies we're selling to, then they can focus on the core product that they're selling, right? Like, they have some core product that they are selling, which is whatever that is, right? So then they can focus 100% on that, and then they don't have to focus on like the onboarding piece. Like, you can say of course they have to make the software great to use and all that stuff, right? But they don't have to focus on all of the aspects of onboarding. And I think that allows them to be more focused on the right things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And do you think that, I mean, I'm sure that in a perfect world, they started off wanting and needing and thinking they were going to have that 100% core focus on the product, right? But then it went on to the onboarding and so forth. And do you think the majority of developers then put way more time on the onboarding aspect than they initially wanted to?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think in general, if you look at any software company today, there are things that, and actually it's a way to think about businesses in general, right? What's your core product? Like, what is truly your core product, and what is something that everybody does, right? Because if you look at a software company, there are things that everybody does that you don't need to build yourself. And for instance, a simple example of that is payments, right? Like payments, everybody needs to handle payments, and payments is a pretty standardized workflow, right? It's like you insert a credit card, you select some kind of plan or product, and you get a receipt or invoice, right? That's a very standardized process. And that's why there's a company called Stripe, which is like I can't remember what they're worth these days, but it's gonna go public probably soon, I guess, and then we'll be able to buy their stock. But they right now they're on the private market, and they are like worth billions of worth, right? Because what they're doing is allowing these software companies to just plug and play a payment solution into their software. And then they don't have to focus on that piece, right? Now they don't have to build a payment part of their app, right? They just need to plug and play Stripe into it. And that's huge, right? And there are many areas like that. So onboarding is another one, right? Like I just told you. And you can keep going. There will be all these different like areas. Integrations is another big one, I think, where there's a big gap in the market. A lot of companies today are building their own integrations, which is kind of silly, right? Why are they doing that? Like, there should just be a software to solve that. And there are some software, but it's not, I don't think it's perfect yet. But yeah, so these are areas, and I think you can think about any business in that way, right? Like, what's your core product? You should really be focused on that, and for everything else, you can use like third-party solutions. I think there are some exceptions to the rule. I think some very large companies, maybe the FANGs of the world, they like to keep things very controlled, right? Yep. So they might want to do all of this themselves, but I think that's the exception to the rule, right? Like the rest of us, we don't need that, right? We can.
Well, the FANGs are not the majority. That's for sure.
No, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And they, you know, like anytime you disrupt something, you're really disrupting a very large majority of the population that has had this pent up demand, right? Yeah. It's the underserved, right?
Yeah, it is.
So what types of companies are you working with now? Like, what are the areas that you're really helping them, these non-developers, develop?
Yeah, no, we work with a lot of like software as a service companies, right? A lot of B2B with complex software enterprise platforms, right? That needs to onboard users. But another big area is also education. So the whole education industry, software for education for teachers, students. That's a big area for us. I think because you can't expect teachers necessarily are very tech savvy, so you need onboarding for your software for those. And there's typically also quite a bit of a scale. So there's a lot of teachers you need to onboard. So doing it as a physical training or like a person doing it, it would just be, you know, a waste of money. Mm-hmm. So that's a big area for us. But yeah, in general, software, a lot of B2B, but also education.
B2B enterprise and education.
Yeah.
Who are the positions or the types of people that are the early adopters of this, that end up finding you, that are really on board?
So for us, it's really the customer success managers and product managers, right? It's not the developers. It's the people who think they need it, right? Like they want to do better at like onboarding, self-service. And then you're, of course, also because of this product-led growth trend, you're seeing a general like strategic direction from many of these companies saying we need to be product-led. So they built like focused teams on becoming product-led, right? And that team will then reach out to us. But yeah, customer success, product managers, those are the typical ones that sign up with Userflow.
That and makes then, of sense.
Course, founders for very early stage companies, right? They're always looking for interesting stuff.
Right. That makes sense with the customer success officers. I mean, that's their biggest pain point is customer success, right?
Yes, exactly.
Who are the ones that are still resistant to this type of change?
Oh, I don't think anybody's like, it's probably down to the different companies. I think even developers love this because it's like, you know, it takes away some of their work so they can focus on the core as we talked about. So I'm not seeing a ton of resistance. I'm seeing, no, honestly, no, it's not. I couldn't come up with somebody who's like resistance against our software. I think with Cobalt, that was a lot easier. With Cobalt, where we were replacing consultancies and we were doing this like Uber for pen testing kind of model. where you were like using freelancers, you were using software, and there was a lot of resistance in like, but how can we trust these pen testers? They're freelancers, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we added all sorts of, again, we use software to solve the problem. So we used identity software, background check software. So they went through all the same and maybe even more checks than a pen tester in a consultancy. But there was this traditional kind of, there were these people who like, but I can't see the person and therefore I can't trust them, right? This kind of thing. So that resistance we had to beat, and I think we did that over time, right? Because we just made a much more effective and efficient process. So it was just a no-brainer to go with Cobalt, right? And we also showed that you could trust these freelancers and that you could actually get better talent by using freelancers because you are not limited to a local group of people, right? So I think we changed that perception over time, but that was a big change for us to make.
It was a big challenge.
For a lot. Exactly. A lot of people had to be convinced that they could trust these people and understand, okay, now it's in the software and all this stuff. You don't have to use these traditional brands anymore, right? And I think that's really the big part. One thing we're facing with Userflow now that I actually talk, but it's not really related to our product, but that is we are a heavy product-led business ourselves. And we're 100% bootstrapped. We are only 3 people. But we have 400 plus customers and we have millions in ARR as annual recurring revenue. But there are still sometimes people who say, but why don't you have 100 employees? Why don't you I'm not sure I trust this small company. And if you look at it, we could be a company with 50 employees, right? So it's not from when you look at everything else than employee count, then we could be, right?
That's actually one of your biggest assets, Esben,
exactly.
is the fact that you are lean and it is only 3 people and look what you're able to do. It's a true testament of your story.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's you can say we're eating our own dog food, right? We're doing what we're selling, right? And I think that's for me huge, right? And some people resonate with that, but there is still and it's especially in the procurement departments, they have this more very rigid way of looking at things, right? Where it's like, okay, what's the revenue? They won't even ask. They're like, have you raised money and so on? These kind of things becomes decision criteria as a risk assessment, right? But I would argue we have all the other numbers in order, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? But that's a challenge that we're trying to beat because we want to show the world that you can actually build a company that's pretty lean and effective, especially a software company.
It makes total sense. I mean, I hear that in many different industries, and even my industry, when people go in to buy services or products, they're asking questions that are really based off of 50 or 70-year-old business processes, how they used to buy then. And that has become the norm. And they're doing it because they don't know. They think this is the standard way to do it. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, your story is actually a real testament to it. You should push that bigger and bigger and bigger. It is the biggest challenge though, isn't it?
Yeah. And another big part of this is, and I think that we all can, I was thinking yesterday if I should make a campaign around this, but no. So the other big thing is, and I think this whole remote working thing has shown, is we have way too many meetings. We have way too many, unnecessary sales meetings or business meetings and all sorts of things. And a lot of things could be handled by writing an email where you ask the actual question and somebody respond back, this is the answer to your question. Go and look at it, right? And that's another push we're doing at Userflow, is trying to reduce these. There's this tradition in SaaS to do sales demos, right? And we always, first of all, on our website, we made it so that's like a tertiary kind of action, right? The primary action is they sign up for a free trial with our product. And we really try to hide a bit away that we also offer demos, but it is there. And even when they then try to schedule a demo, we write them, but you should really try the software before you do a demo, because what ends up happening in those demos, if they haven't tried the software, it just becomes like this kind of, I could have done it as a video, right? Like I could have, I'm not saying anything novel. I'm just saying the same thing.
It's a waste of
again
time,
and again.
isn't it?
Exactly, right? I'm like a video, right? Like I could be a video that is like just saying, this is what this does, this is what, great, they say, right? And I could also send them a video that said exactly the same. But if they've tried the product, then it's okay to do a call, right? Because then it becomes an actual conversation. Oh, I tried this. How do I do this? Can I do this as well? And so on, right? Then it's much more interesting. And I think it's actually a much better way to assess a product, right? Try it first and then do a call to, if you need a call even, to talk about it, right?
I agree with you. I think we do need to have less meetings.
Yeah. And I don't think the whole remote world, in some ways it changed it a bit, the need for that, but in other ways it also, and that's I think in big organizations, the smaller things became meetings as well, which you should be careful about then. If you didn't, either you were smart and you said, okay, we can work more asynchronously, like use things like Loom video and, send videos to each other, use documentation systems.
I love Loom. I use that all the time.
We do the same for support and so on. So you can send a short video because then it becomes personalized, but it's asynchronous, right? You don't need to sit on a call together to talk about it. So that, I think a lot of companies went in that direction, but some companies maybe started doing a bit the opposite. And that was like when they had a small question, let's say they didn't have all this great software in place that could facilitate fast communication like Slack and Teams or whatever, to chat quickly about something, then it ends up becoming a meeting, right? Because suddenly this single small question they had, they would in the past have maybe covered by walking up to the person in the office and asking, what is this about? And great, that would have been a 5-minute conversation. Now that becomes a meeting for somebody. They book a meeting to ask that single question, right? And that's not the solution. The solution is the other way that I just mentioned, where you document more, you use chat systems, you use software, right, to remove this need for meetings.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So I know what your challenge is. Where do you think? I mean, it sounds like you have a perfect storm, right? You've got the end user error, you've got the product growth trend, right? Yeah. You have even the remote workforce. That's like a thing in your favor, right?
Yeah.
You've got this whole non-devs becoming devs, right?
Yep.
Where does this segment of the industry go? What does it look like 5 years? What does SaaS look like 5-10 years? Paint that picture for me, for the workforce, for enterprise, for small companies, the economy.
So I think SaaS is gonna, as Mark Andreessen said, eat the world. So you're gonna start seeing software in every process. I think my home country, Denmark, is actually a brilliant example of that. Now I live in the US. Denmark is a very small country, but they digitalized all the government processes. So nothing is based on paper. And I think that's, when you start seeing that in every country in the world, then we know software has reached its full potential, right? And that's, we still have a long way to go there, especially in the US. I think there are so many paper processes still.
So many.
When it comes to government. So yeah, so I think that is that's what we need to see. So it's basically just it's not even like everybody talk about AI and all. Yes, that's also going to come, right? But those are the people who are like one step ahead of the curve, right? Really what we need to do first is bring software to everyone and every process. So yeah, I think that's what we're going to see.
So when you talk about Denmark, right, and their government being digitalized, in America, before government will do it, it has to come through business. it has to be initiated through business. I don't know. Was that the same in your country?
No. So Denmark is a very government driven country, right? So they actually made their own IT department, and you can say, should they do that? There's a bit of a, especially as an entrepreneur, that's not so cool, because what they end up doing is they go with these large IT consultancies to do these things, and they end up building custom systems for government, right? Where the entrepreneurial idea is more build something that a lot of people can use, standardized and software. And what you saw was when Denmark started doing this was they were not buying those standardized software. They were buying consultancies who were building customized software, right? And you can say that's fine, it worked for Denmark, but what if Denmark had actually built it as standardized software? Then they could have sold that to the world, right? And that's always the argument you can make for why businesses should be more involved. But I think it's still kudos to Denmark for actually being able to do it, right? Like I think, and it was purely like government driven together with consultancies, right? And they built systems for things like tax. So in US we use TurboTax, right? Which is a business doing the business. It's a business solving a problem that the government should maybe solve themselves. But you can say the US way is that the business solves it, right? And that's great. But the problem is only if business in tax, that can work, right? And TurboTax has been able to do that. But in other areas of government, people are not able to do that, right? But in Denmark, they have been, because it was a more integrated kind of process of building the software for the government, right?
Yeah. Well, kudos to Denmark.
Yeah.
In America, it's going to have to come through the businesses, right?
Yeah. And Denmark is a small country, so it's easier to do these things, right? But I think the first, yes, you can say it should come through business, but I think the US government should make it a priority, right? Like they should, and this comes down to UX. That's really the big it seems like they don't care about the UX for their end users, right? Like the US government doesn't care. They don't care about the UX of their end users. Exactly. And government doesn't. Yeah. It seems like every governmental process is a painful, or at least a lot of them are painful processes for the end users, right? And it shouldn't be, right? Working with government should really be easy, right? It should be, software driven. And yeah, it's just.
Well, Esben, I'll talk to you next lifetime. Maybe that will change.
Let's hope. Just a simple thing as getting visas, right? That's so.
You don't even get me started on that. Yeah, yes. You're exactly right.
Yes.
So basically, business is going to have to change that before government will in America. Where do you think that's going to come from? Do you think it's going to come from the SMBs really pushing it, or enterprise first?
I think right now we're in a mix, right? I think where you have the most potential to change the most is actually SMB. I think probably in SMB, that's where there still are a lot of non-software driven processes. So yeah, software companies focusing on SMB are great, right? Like we use a company called Gusto for payroll. And there's still a lot of SMBs in the US that does payroll on spreadsheets or pen and paper, and which is insane, but that's how it is. And I think that's amazing if a company like Gusto can go out and really get all those small businesses to start using a software for their payroll, right?
And it brings down costs tremendously. Yeah.
So I think that's the untapped potential. I think enterprises, they've just been forced to do it, right? Like enterprises have been forced to use software to grow and scale, and they have the money. So I think the next market business-wise is definitely SMBs. And then, government.
I agree with you on that.
Government needs to also happen at some point.
Yeah.
But yes.
Esben, what were you like as little Esben? I mean, like, were you always sort of this like, you grew up in this, different era, right? Technology is just part of life. Were you always looking for better ways to do things?
Yeah. So I think I grew up in this, So I'm born in '85. I grew up in a generation where there was a mix of people, right? And where I was one of the first people to get a computer. So I think the later generations, all of them had a computer, right? And before that, nobody had a computer. So I was in this generation where you had a mix of people. So I became, together with another group of people, became the experts in computers, and you saw these other people and you didn't understand why they didn't understand all these things about computers, right? And so on. So I think in some ways, yes, I've always been a big proponent of like bringing more computer-driven stuff to the world, right? Like, and always been super interested in that and how you can change the world with software. I was also with my brother, we were building websites very early on, right? And the internet was like this crazy place at that time. You just built like these crazy websites that you with strange music files and all sorts of things, right?
How old were you when you were doing
it was
this?
fun. I was probably like 14, 15, something like that.
And who are you building websites for, or just your own website?
That was like, I don't think we had any end user in mind. We just like building these websites and we're hoping that some people were gonna go to them, probably like-minded people like ourselves. But we just had a lot of fun building it, right? Like building something that was out there on the internet, right? And our audience was probably people who were like similar to ourselves. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And I think my journey through studies and jobs and so on was always in software. So I've always seen this. Actually, my first student job in university was at a software called Audit Data that were doing software for the audiology industry, where they were helping people, one by managing people who were, had hearing aids, but they were also using software to fit the hearing aids, right? So hearing aids has always been, they've actually been very technology driven, like the way you can fit hearing aids through software and do all sorts of cool stuff to basically allow people to hear normally again, right? And that's just amazing. So
It is amazing.
And you can do a lot of great things like that with software.
How did you like working, gaining that knowledge of global IT development and with Accenture?
I joined Accenture after my studies, and that was a great. I always wanted, this is something today I'm a bit more. I'm advocating for more people to become entrepreneurs straight out of university, right? And I think in the US it's a bit more normal, but in Denmark it wasn't, and now it's becoming better. But in Denmark at that time, the normal thing was just to go into a big consultancy because that's where you could get the cool jobs and
right.
all that, right?
It gave you a really good global perspective, right?
Yeah, it does, and it did. I mean, I worked in different countries and so on. I worked with people from all over the world, so it did give me a global perspective. But it also made me realize that when you're a consultant, an IT consultant, you're building these systems, and again, typically these are large-scale systems, right? So it's like large IT systems that you're building, and you don't forget about the end user, but you forget about the end user experience. You look at the end user as somebody who has some requirements. They need to be able to do this. And that's how you think about it, right? So that's really okay, they need to be able to do this. Yes, I could spend some time making the UX of that super nice, but reality is these projects are often like pressed for time. So it ends up becoming maybe not the best user experience. You maybe use some legacy software to like, the SAPs of the world, the Oracle's really old software. So the basis for your software is just not really user-friendly, right? So you end up building more, you're filling requirements, right? You're allowing people to do what they're supposed to do, but you haven't thought user experience into it. And the other big thing is you're building this software very customized for a single big business, right? And what I wanted to do was to build some software that could be used by many companies, right? Like and be reused. And that's why I decided to embark on this entrepreneurial journey. One, to bring something to the world that more people could use and benefit from, and also I think own my own delivery, right? Like because as a consultancy, you end up delivering the software. And then the customer starts using it, but then you're gone, right? Then you're on to the next project. Where
like you're talking the talk, but not walking the walk, right?
Exactly. When we own the software, we can't walk away, right? We have to, if there's a problem,
you better make it better.
Customers are saying, exactly, our customers are saying, this doesn't work. I don't know how to do this. Then we need to fix that, right? So yeah, I think that's something I like as well, that I own the delivery from throughout the life cycle.
I think your experience has really made it very personal for what you're doing now, right? Did you ever have a moment where you were like, that's it, that's effing it, I'm like going to make this better for the end user? Was there ever a point in your career where you were like, this is where we're going?
There was not, I think there were definitely points when I was working in IT consultancy where I had to be the tough guy who told the customers, but you can't, like, this is you can't do this, right? And you feel kind of bad because you're giving them maybe a solution that is a bit worse, right? But you have to drive this project to completion, right? So there, and I would say in some cases that's also the right thing to do, but in other cases you're limiting user friendliness, right? So I think I had experiences like this, but I think as I started the entrepreneurial journey, which I just started on kind of randomly, I met a guy in Accenture who convinced me to start Cobalt. But as from the day one I've been doing Cobalt, and today when I'm doing Userflow, I always think about user experience. Like I can't stop thinking about it. Like it
really molded you, didn't it?
In Cobalt, when I hear a customer saying, when I was hearing a customer saying, we can't do this, then I always thought, okay, how can we solve that in the product? How can we make the product smarter? And that's also the approach we have in Userflow. And it's really that product-led mindset. Don't add a person to answer that support question. Fix it in the product itself.
That's badass. I love that. That's what makes you a disruptor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so what are your crazy passions? What do you do outside of Userflow?
So I do a lot. I love traveling. During the pandemic, I've been traveling all over the US and I experienced the amazing nature that this country has to offer. So I'm an avid hiker and biker. So I love hiking and riding my bicycle. And yeah, I've been in amazing places this last 2 years, Utah and Colorado and all these amazing places.
Beautiful state.
Right now I'm back in the Bay Area, and that's also a great place for, especially bicycling. Is amazing here.
Yeah, it's true. So what was one of your best experiences traveling around the US and like in nature? Like you thought, oh my gosh, this is just beautiful.
Oh man, there are so many, but the area around, I think Moab in Utah is just one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's with Arches National Park and Canyonlands. It feels like being on Mars or something. It's just something you wouldn't see anywhere else, and I think that's quite amazing.
Yeah, and do you ever have this like perspective coming from a small country to like, America as far as like space?
Yeah, there's a lot of space in America. That's for sure. I would say, and no offense to Nevada, but it's not the most interesting place to drive through when you go from California to Utah. It's a big desert, right? And it's just like when you've seen one part of it, you've kind of seen it all.
It's true.
So
a desert is a desert is a desert.
I had to take that drive a lot of times because that's the fastest way to get back to California from Colorado and Utah is Nevada, right? So Yeah, that there's a lot of space, and in some places it's beautiful, right up in like Wyoming and these kind of places. It's just so beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can change the user experience through Nevada sometime.
Yeah, no, I even though the software is eating the world, I still highly encourage people to go outside and experience I'm not quite sure we need a metaverse just yet. I think the real world is pretty great as it is, and we should just experience it more.
Amen. Well, we will leave it on that controversial note here. Awesome. Hey, Esben, how do people get a hold of you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Esben Friis-Jensen, and then I'm also on Twitter. So Esben FJ is my handle on Twitter.
And if they want to find you on Userflow?
Just go to userflow.com.
Great. Thanks, Esben.
Yep. Thank you.
That's a wrap, everyone. If you learned something today, go tell someone about this podcast. And thank you for listening to Disruption Interruption, where we transform lives, change consumer behavior, alter economics, and never accept the status quo. Ciao for now. Because we live in a highly litigious society, with America being one of the top litigious countries in the world, here's our legal disclaimer. This information is not intended to be a substitute for professional public relations or legal advice. Do not disregard seeking professional, legal, healthcare, or financial advice, or delay seeking professional PR or legal advice because of something you have heard here. Contact an attorney to obtain advice on any particular legal situation or problem. Use of this podcast or our website or any of its social media or email links do not create an agency-client relationship between Johto PR and the user.